Welcome to Chef's Kitchen, presented by Toronto Life, Longo's, and the Loft at Longo's. I'm Jessica Fink from Toronto Life, and it's an absolute pleasure to introduce Chef Suzanne Barr, one of North America's most respected chefs. Her latest project, True True Diner, landed on Toronto Life's Best Restaurants 2020 list. Now, today, she will be making her signature pumpkin hummus for us. Without further ado, let's welcome Suzanne.
Hello everybody, I'm Chef Suzanne Barr, bringing to you one of my favorite classic recipes, pumpkin hummus. And I want to give a big shout out to my friends from Toronto Life magazine, as well as Longo's, for providing us with some of the ingredients and all the great opportunities having you guys here with me tonight in my kitchen, showing you my favorite recipe, pumpkin hummus. All right guys, let's get started. So let's talk about that squash or that pumpkin. So this is one of my favorite ingredients. This is our kombucha, also known as Buttercup Squash. You can find this pretty much at any grocery stores. This is the season right now if you're looking for something to kind of like play with the same flavor profile that this kombucha squash will give you, which is it's very starchy. It needs a lot of liquid and needs a lot. It has its own flavor, which is really sweet. It's earthy. It's really nutty when you really roast it well and you add all these beautiful spices that we'll talk about a little bit later. For those that are at home cooking along with me, hopefully you guys have had already an opportunity to pre-roast your squash or pumpkin so that we can do this together in our food processor or whatever you have at home in order to be able to really get that puree on the pumpkin. Okay, so once again, this is our butternut squash, and you know it's just got so much versatility. You can use it in a salad. We're using it today in this beautiful hummus recipe. Folks would stop me in the street literally and say, how did you come up with this recipe? And honestly, it was just wanting to use ingredients that I love so much and being able to also create recipes off of things that I love eating. So hummus is something that I love to enjoy, whether I'm home just needing a quick snack or a dip or something, or when I have folks coming over and I'm just trying to entertain people and I want to give people just something, a healthier option. This pumpkin, this squash is full of so many vitamins, a bit of vitamin A, a bit of vitamin C, so you can't go wrong with being able to use this as your base of your hummus. So what I've already pre-done is I've pre-roasted it. The recipe for this dish is actually already on the website. If you guys don't have it, we'll make sure that you guys get this recipe. So I've got a little bit of cumin, I've got a bit of cinnamon, salt, and olive oil. That's it. I've roasted this in the oven for 35 minutes with just parchment on my sheet tray. And it's a little, like I said, so it's a starchy or squash pumpkin. So don't worry, it looks rather dry when it first comes out of the oven. The most important thing that you want to achieve is that it's nice and fully cooked. So fully cooked looks kind of like it's dry and it's dried out, but that's okay. We're gonna peel off as much of that exterior dry skin that you don't need. So that's the kind of that purple greenish hue, gray. That's what we don't want in our actual recipe itself, okay? Now, when you're cutting this down, just make sure you're being very mindful, using a sharp knife and making sure you're cutting off that top part and laying it flat down so that you can get a good position with your knife, just cutting one side and then turning around and cutting the other side so that that knife goes all the way through. And be really mindful because you don't want to cut a round object when it's on its side. You want to make sure you stabilize it. So that's why we cut off the top or the bottom so that we can properly stabilize it on our cutting board. Once you've cut it into, you're going to cut the whole thing in half. Then from there, you're going to cut it into quarters. And then you're gonna remove all of the seeds and that film, all that inside guts. You have pumpkin seeds. Rinse them off, toast them up, and eat them. Enjoy them, absolutely. Try to repurpose all of your ingredients when you're cooking in your kitchen. You know, we hear so much about trying to eliminate how much waste we have in our home, and this is absolutely one way to be able to do that, where you can reuse the seeds from the pumpkin, from the squash, and you can actually enjoy them as a quick snack that will sit on your countertop, or you can put it in your fridge and spice it really simply with a little bit of salt, and that's it. Enjoy it, and really share that recipe with your friends, because you'll see how far you can go with these leftover ingredients. Okay, so back to making this hummus. So I'm going to continue to remove that exterior gray. Now it's pretty roasted. It looks almost kind of, I don't know, like a shiny golden color. So we're going to go right into our food processor. I like to help out the food processor a bit by breaking up so that the chunks aren't too big. We don't want to overwork our machinery. So you want to take care of your equipment, and by doing that is really making sure that when you're putting things into your Vitamix or your Cuisinart food processor, that it's not so challenging for the machine to do all the work. Okay, so I'm just breaking it up with my fingers. Make sure you wash your hands, obviously, if you're working at home, or if you're not at home and you're cooking with friends, get some gloves out. Just make sure you're being safe with everything that's happening in the world right now. We just want to make sure that we're practicing safe habits in our kitchen. Okay, so we'll continue to crumble and break up the pumpkin squash right into the base of the Vitamix or the Cuisinart. Now keep in mind, you don't want to overcrowd your equipment, right? You don't want to overwork it. So if it gets to the point where you're like, I think that might be enough, and I'll show you guys, then what we might do is we'll batch it. And batching it is, we'll puree half of this now, and then we'll add a bit more. But I think we might be okay. This pumpkin size wasn't that large. It was a great size, and this is probably going to yield roughly about 3, almost 4 cups of this roasted squash. Okay, and keep in mind, this part here, this outside skin, you can also eat this. It's really, again, it's dry, it's chewy, but it has a nice flavor, and that flavor is coming from the olive oil, the cinnamon, and the cumin, and some of that salt that you used. Okay, so again, I'm just going to continue to break this up and make sure that I'm not going to overwork my piece of equipment. Take care of your equipment at home, right? So we'll just continue to remove the exterior skin, and I think what I might do is, rather than forcing and trying to get this all in, I'm going to get this one more piece into my food processor, and then I'm going to actually do a little bit of a pulse and just see if I can start to puree and smooth out. Now, I'm not going to add any liquid yet. I'm just going to see, but we're probably going to immediately need to add something because it is pretty dry. So the first thing, like I suggest, is I'm just going to give it a little bit of a, but we're back. I've got, I said probably about a third. I've got 3 pieces left here that I'm going to get in here, but I just want to move this pumpkin around, the squash around inside of the food processor, just so that it's not just like starting with all of this wonderful, dry, but really juicy, rich flavor from the squash. So I'm going to give it a little push. There we go. Nice. What you like to see. So that first little go about was really just kind of getting things moving, and it's giving me an idea how much more space I have. So I've got a bit more space. I think, like I said, I can get this all in. So I'm just going to continue to peel off that outer skin and fill that right into the rest of the last bits of my food processor. And again, you're going to use your hands, and we're just going to break it up as best of our ability. And the great thing, like I said, is like, you know, I have my preference for pumpkin. I have actually eaten this pumpkin most of my life, being of Caribbean background. This particular style of pumpkin is really indigenous to like the Caribbean and hot climate places. but it does lend for like good for stews and vegetarian roast, and it's just, there's so many things that you can do with it. I've never actually even made gnocchi, and I've also made a bit of dumplings with it. So you can really play around with this particular pumpkin. Sweet potato is another great option if you wanted to try sweet potato hummus. If you wanted to do, if you have a preference, if you like parsnips. I find that myself personally, I love to use whole, ingredients when I'm making my hummus. So traditionally when you think of hummus, you're thinking, where's the chickpeas? Where are the beans? Where's that starchy? So, thinking about that really kind of made this recipe come out of me thinking about, like, I need a starchier vegetable that has a bit of sweetness to it, but also will lend to holding on to all of the ingredients that go into hummus that make it so great, which is the lemon, the tahini, the oil, a bit of cumin, depending. Everyone has their version of how they love to make their hummus, but I personally am kind of classic. I like that, I love the spiciness, the warmth of the cumin, and I love that zestiness from the lemon juice and the tahini. Can't get enough of tahini. Me, I love a lot of it. So this is what I have left. I've got all of the exterior skins of the roasted kombucha squash, and again, we roasted it with a bit of cayenne, salt, cinnamon, and olive oil. That recipe will also be a part of the recipe of the hummus altogether. So I'm going to put this aside and use this for later. Who knows what I'll come up with. And now we've got all of our pumpkin and our squash, pumpkin squash, in our food processor. I'm going to give it a little spin, and we're going to see how we're doing. If it's not too full, looking very, very good. So you want to make sure when you're making your hummus that your pumpkin puree doesn't hold over the top of your plate. You want to make sure that there's room for your liquids to come in to the top of your food processor. So I'm starting to let this work. I want to get this puree to start to blend together and lock it, almost become almost like dough when you're making dough, say, and I'll show you guys. You can see this now, that this kind of resembles, like, if you've ever made pizza dough or if you made bread dough in your food processor, this is kind of that consistency. It's starting to thicken up. And this is exactly what we want to do to get this process going, all right? You'll see some of the drier bits of the pumpkin or the squash, but just don't worry about that, because it's all gonna blend really well once we start adding in our tahini and our oil and our maple syrup and everything else that we need, okay? So the first ingredient that I like to start with is actually my tahini. If you know what tahini is sesame puree. And sesame puree is kind of like the staple, one of the main staples of making hummus. And whenever you buy it, you'll see the top of it typically has a nice thick cap of oil. That's when you know you have got good quality tahini. There's a few local vendors in Ontario that actually make their own tahini. I'm just using an organic tahini that we picked up from Longo's. That's going to be a great addition to this recipe. So I'm going to pour off that cap of oil, and I'm going to use it. But I'm looking for about a cup of tahini for this particular recipe based on how much that pumpkin that I have. Now keep in mind, this tahini is also similar to, like, if you're working with a peanut butter, almond puree, cashew puree. There's so many different nut purees but tahini is very specific when making hummus, okay? You typically can find it either in the health food aisle at your grocery store. One of the Longos might have it there, or you might be able to find it in the aisle with the nut butters, okay? So I'm gonna actually take the top off. I'm gonna pour, just had a little bit of spill, don't worry. I'm gonna pour just about half of that tahini in. And I'm also gonna add in a bit of lemon juice. And I like my lemon pulp in this. And absolutely, one of my favorite ingredients that really kind of make it savory instead of this sweeter on the sweeter side is I have a whole garlic clove here. I'm not going to add the whole thing because I don't want it to be too garlicky. I kind of want it to just have a bit of the hint of garlic. I sometimes tend to make a garlic oil at home, and then I'll add a bit of that oil and maybe some of those roasted garlics in it as well. But I have some raw garlic tonight, so I'm just going to add that right in, break it up just a bit, because you want it to really get mixed well within this recipe, okay? So that's about good. And like I said, so we added probably about maybe 2 tablespoons or 3 tablespoons of lemon juice and a half a cup of the tahini. And we really just want to kind of get it going, right? So I'm going to turn it back on. I'm just going to make sure we position. There we go. And you're going to start to see that this Cuisinart, it's working. This food processor is moving. Everything is really starting to mix well. At this point, I'm going to turn it off, and I'm going to give a little push down. My pumpkin is definitely thickening it up, and it's almost kind of gummy-like. Don't worry, it's all going to break up. It's all going to make sense. It looks a little scary right now, but don't worry. We're going to get to that consistency that we're looking for, okay? So, I'm going to add some oil. Going to give it a little bit more. We don't want to get that pumpkin at the top, right? So we want to just make sure we keep on scraping it down. Keep scraping it down. At this point, what I might suggest is, like, because it is so thick and we have that really kind of gummy consistency from the tahini, it's very oily. There's oil from the roasting of the olive oil on the outside, also the oil from the tahini. So this is just like full of oil. So the one thing I love to add, just to kind of thin it out just a bit without adding more oil, I'm going to add some water to this. So I'm actually going to grab just a little bit of cold water, and I'm going to help to kind of loosen up, break up this whole pumpkin mass and start creating that smoother consistency that we need. So I'm just going to take a bit of cold water, and before I even think about adding oil in, I'm going to put that back. I'm going to hit it with some oil. I'm going to go in with a cup of water. Okay? And I'm going to turn back on. There we go. And you're going to start to see it moving around. I'm going to add some more water. And so she's moving around really. And I'm just going to turn off a machine just to give her a little break as she is working. I'm going to take out, because I've got a lot of puree in here, this is definitely working and moving a lot harder and working this machine harder than it needs to. So at this point, this goes back to when I was saying that sometimes you need to kind of batch it. So I'm going to pull out about half of this, put this in a bowl. That way we can actually take our time to make this. We don't want to overwork, and we don't want to stall our machine. So just take out, I would say about half of it, and that's about half, okay? This way everything gets properly mixed. It's not feeling too, it's really got a good amount of oil. So we want to break up that oiliness. It's okay. There we go. I'm going to add some more water. And then a slow drizzle. And what's happening, the water is kind of really breaking it up. Just that slow drizzle. Okay? Now I'm starting to see kind of that consistency that I've been looking for, which is it less about being really thick and gelatinous, and more of it feeling more like a puree that's not too gummy, okay? I'm going to add some lemon juice now. lemon juice is really going to kind of bring out that citrus notes, and it's going to cut into all that fattiness from the tahini oil as well as the olive oil that was roasted. And keep in mind, again, it's a starchy squash. So as you can hear, that my Cuisinart is happy again. She's processing, she's running through everything, and I'm just gonna start adding a bit of salt. I haven't tasted it yet, but remember I had some salt on the outside. I'm just gonna add a bit more on the inside to start to really bring those flavors out, okay? I'm gonna add a little bit of my cumin, a couple pinches, and now I'm gonna add a bit of maple syrup. The maple syrup addition for me really kind of gives it like that sweeter hummus that you maybe typically don't have, maybe unless you have a beet hummus. But this is a nice addition. You think about pumpkin, you don't want it to be too sweet, but we want it just to have a little hint of sweetness. I would say roughly you're about adding, now remember we have half of the batch in here, so I'm just going to add maybe like not even a quarter cup. I would say about 2 or 3 tablespoons. Okay, it's moving beautifully. It's sounding great. My machine is happy. I'm happy. I'm going to give a turn off and taste and see where we're at with flavor. That color is driving me crazy. It's so vibrant. It's so beautiful. It looks like a beautiful pumpkin pie, but it's actually pumpkin hummus. Still super fatty, really fatty. I'm getting a lot of that tahini. I'm gonna add a bit more lemon juice because the lemon is that acid to really cut into this. Okay, so let's add a bit more lemon juice. Okay. I'm just gonna add the rest of it. We'll grab some more lemon juice for that other batch. It's also a good idea when you're working with tahini, and one thing that I didn't do is I like to mix it up so that it's less thick. It's actually a bit of that oil that has been pulled out of the sesame puree. It's actually added, it's incorporated back into the actual puree of sesame. So one thing I should have done and I didn't do, but if you're at home, it's your first time working with tahini, make sure before you start pouring off that fat cap of oil to mix that in with your puree of sesame paste, just so that it doesn't lock up and seal your actual tahini or lock up your hummus. Because if it locks up your hummus, then you're going to be in a situation where we were, but we were able to save it. And the way that we saved it was by adding a bit of water and also adding a bit of lemon juice to kind of really cut in and not make it taste so heavy, so fatty, and so gummy. Okay? Let's give another taste. Again, the color is just looking beautiful. It's bubbling. It's so creamy. It's so thick. It's almost a perfect balance of the sweetness from the actual squash itself, a bit from the maple syrup, the zestiness from the lemon juice, the butteriness from the sesame tahini. It's really well balanced. And I'm just going to continue to go. I'm going to add a bit more salt. The onion also is right there in the back of my throat, which is nice. Salt really is actually going to bring up all of those flavor notes. So they're all there, but I want to taste them a bit more in the front end. I want to taste it the first bite that I get. I'm just going to add a bit more maple syrup. And you'll see there's a few variations on the amount to add of maple syrup. So if you feel like you like kind of on the sweeter end of trying to make a pumpkin hummus, then go for that. But if you're someone that kind of wants it more zesty, your true hummus fanatic and you like those notes in the back of your jaw from that zestiness, from the tahini, the tartness that you want, then you know where you should go. A bit more tahini, a bit more lemon juice, a bit more salt to bring that all forward, okay? I'm gonna give another taste. Oof, so beautiful. That little bit of extra salt that we added in really helped it come forward. It's so creamy. It's so beautiful. It's just got all the things that you want in a really yummy hummus. It almost is like a beautiful rich puree. But once you put it in your fridge, because it is a little warm right now because the pumpkin came out the oven and all of my ingredients were, room temperature. But once you put this in the fridge, let this set up, you add some wonderful olive oil to top it with, and then garnish it with some house-made pistachio za'atar that I've made for you guys today. You'll hit exactly what you're looking for with your homemade pumpkin hummus. So I'm actually going to take this out and I'm going to prepare the other remaining pumpkin hummus. And then what we'll do is we'll plate it up. We'll put some of our garnishes, our accompaniments with our hummus. I've made you guys a few different variations on how to do it. If you have guests that are coming over for the holiday season this year that are practicing more of a gluten-free lifestyle versus having pita chips, then you can have some fresh, wonderful, beautiful heirloom carrots. I've got some spiralized kohlrabi, which are really wonderful accents to add to this hummus platter that we'll create together, okay? So I've got my platter. I'm just gonna move all my ingredients off my board. Always clean as you go. Don't worry, that tahini has such a lifespan that you can reuse it, and there's so many different recipes in using tahini. So I'm just gonna start to take this off of here, and I just want you guys to look at that consistency. I mean, it literally looks like a pumpkin pie filling. Your guests might be a little confused, like pumpkin pie with carrots, and you're just gonna let them know it's actually pumpkin hummus. People are always amazed by this recipe. I think so much of it was the tartness from the lemon juice, the sweetness from the maple syrup. A lot of it was unexpected flavor profiles that people don't typically find when they're having a hummus. You'll have all the tahini and everything, but when you add pumpkin to it and you actually are like honoring the color and the flavor and the sweetness and the way that you handled this pumpkin and squash, you're just gonna amaze your friends and your family, and also amaze yourself because you've made it yourself at home. I don't even know if we need to make, what I'm gonna do with that remaining is I'm gonna continue to make that on my own, and if you guys have some more, you can always continue to make it at a later day. The wonderful thing about this, not that you can freeze it, but before you've added any, if you have a lot of pumpkin remaining and you want to be able to freeze it, you can also freeze it before you add the tahini and everything else. So we've got here our pumpkin hummus. I think this is a beautiful proportion to create our platter that we're gonna do together on camera. I'm just gonna give it a nice little deep swirl. Kind of traditionally when you see hummus, you give like a nice divot to be able to have that oil in there and allow for your herbs. And if you have a za'atar, which is a sesame dry spice mix, we're gonna have that. We're gonna add that as our garnish on top. I wanna chop up some fresh parsley because I think the green will be a wonderful contrast for color. And I'm just gonna grab my knife and just do a little rough chop. This way, just add some more color and contrast and more flavor to this recipe. I'm so happy that you guys have been able to watch me make one of my favorite classic dishes, a dish that I used to make at a few restaurants here in the city. And I'm so happy to be making it with you guys. And I want you guys to enjoy your holiday season with your friends, your family, whatever you celebrate. Just make sure that you're cooking with so much intention. You're cooking wonderful, delicious food that you love, that is a bit creative, that gets you out of your comfort zone and allows you to just create. I'm just gonna finish this off with a little bit of olive oil. Little spice at the end is also great, whether you have a little bit of cumin or if you have a little bit of cayenne is always great. I love to finish it off with some large rock sea salt just to give it that top flavor. And we've got our accompaniment to go on the side. We've got our pita chips that we've made, roasted with olive oil and salt. We've got our spiralized kohlrabi, some fresh, crisp, heirloom local carrots. And we've got our decadent, deep, rich, sweet, but so tart and zesty and delicious, our pumpkin hummus with our pistachio za'atar and some fresh parsley. Guys, thank you, Toronto Life. Thank you, Longos, for allowing me to take you guys on a journey with me on making one of my favorite classic dishes, pumpkin hummus. I'm Chef Suzanne Barr. Thank you guys for being with me tonight, and enjoy, 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 and happy holidays.